Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've talked to you. Now, before we get started with the video, I think it's important that I leave a little bit of context, and that's because this isn't something we usually do. And what better way to do this than to have a friend of mine who's very close to my heart and who actually got me into the FGC, and that's Zhaoyun. You've seen him on the channel a couple times. If you haven't already, then I'll link you the videos in which he's featured in. But back to the point at hand. So we talked about a little something that a lot of players, especially new players in the FGC, get a lot of confusion about, and that is puppet characters. Now, puppet characters, we go on to explain what that is. The videos we're gonna be assessing are gonna talk about them as well. But this whole thing is basically just two different players, one who's had a lot of time in the FGC and myself who has relatively less time, and we take both our knowledges of what we know of the FGC, its character archetypes and whatnot, and we kind of just look over these videos as a way to like either nitpick it, correct it where it may need correcting, or talk about certain things that we agree upon. It's essentially a little discussion, and that's the whole point of this video. But at the very end of the day, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, it got really heated and it was late at night, so we had to keep it down. If you guys do like this kind of stuff, do let me know in the comments, because this isn't something I plan on regularly doing, but it's something I can consider doing for the future if you guys are really interested in this stuff. One final thing before we go to the video, just understand that this is not a professional or an expert analysis of these things. We are essentially casuals, but we have a very competitive nature and we want to learn how to play games seriously. We may not play at tournament level or high level, hell, not even at mid level, but at the very end of the day, we are invested players of fighting games, some more so than others. And I think if you are just getting into it, if you have a good basis of FGC terminology, knowledge, and character archetypes and whatnot, then this might be the video for you. Nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy it all the same, and if you do like the video, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, click the bell notification, and with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy. Take care.
But the two main ones is either now the game is a versus fighting game, where each player has a team of characters, or we can make them into a puppet character. Puppet characters aren't two characters in one unless you're playing multi-blood. It's a character who has a disjointed entity that it commands with specific moves.
That is very much textbook, but it's also very vague as well.
This is generally used in the context of two separate characters. However, this isn't always the case, as some characters use an object or fucking...
Wait.
No. You using Minot?
No. That's why I have a long discussion with another guy who think Minot was a puppet character. I was like, no.
Minot's not she's a set play character. Her whole purpose is getting those orbs in place and comboing into them. Like, her and Rose have a very similar play style. But the difference between the two is that Rose doesn't heavily rely on set play. Minot does.
Yeah.
So now you already have two different archetypes that you've covered that aren't in your category. You have a set play character and you have a mix-up character with pseudo set play.
Here's the thing, like a lot of people doesn't understand the puppet character. That's why you see that their like and dislike ratio wasn't that much. But for a veteran like me, who experienced puppet character, that's a no-no for those two characters.
I've only really been into fighting games like seriously for like the past couple years. You know this personally, but within those 2 years I've gained a lot of knowledge about like different archetypes. Looking at this analysis, I get where this is coming from, but it's like if you take more than a minute, if you take like about a minute or so to like really think this through, you already have disrupted your own argument like twice.
Minot is Street Fighter V's resident puppet character.
No, she is not.
She fights using her big glass ball and is able to position it at different points of the screen.
No.
Already, you've already disrupted your argument.
She set up the ball, okay, and make it explode. That's a fucking set play.
Compare that to Seth from Uniclear. That is set play. It's in the name, set play. That is similar to a puppet character, but these are two completely different functions. It is not a separate entity.
Minot is not a puppet. Minot is basically a Bridget character. You know, when he set up a yo-yo and calling them back or turn into a fucking teddy bear?
Yeah.
That's literally what Minot doing right there.
It's the same thing with Lychee. Lychee sets the stick, and depending on whether you have the staff or you don't, you have different ways of playing the game.
The only time I see a Lychee player try to sandwich you between her staff and her staff is when she calls a super.
This means she fits pretty well in with the Zoner archetype, and even was able to inspire Beerus with some moves.
No. Beerus is actually based on Venom.
Keep a pause, because he said something about like Minot having some sort of zoning capabilities, and I think that actually is true. In a sense, Minot kind of has like some sort of Ouroboros kind of thing going on. However, her stuff is more oriented with set play rather than just spamming a button and you just basically get neutral for days. Like basically, as you said, the character is pretty much similar to Venom. Beerus is also very similar to Venom in the sense that you basically set up the orbs. On top of that, hitting them with any button in the game basically makes it travel wherever the fuck. Venom, on the other hand, places them specifically in certain spots.
But then he can hit that very ball into a different direction as well, depending on the normal he hit it.
Basically, this entire explanation is just going on set play and set play alone. If this was about set play characters, it makes sense. Everything he talked about makes sense. But with puppet characters, it legit has nothing to do with them right now. The only time he showed a puppet character was with fucking Zato, and he wasn't even talking about Zato.
So, let's look at a more well-rounded puppet character with Android 18.
Stop already. I fucking hate him already. I hate him because I know I play the character. She is on a list of mains I play in this game. And the fact that he calls her a puppet character makes me cringe because I know that's not the case. It's like he picked up a script and he just picked up characters that have similarities.
If you want to talk about puppet character, you have to put Zato 1 on the front.
Now that we have that misunderstanding that none of you had out of the way,
you actually created the misunderstanding, you piece of shit. You created the misunderstanding. Now lie in your bed and think about what you've done. Go to the corner.
Oh my god. Go to the corner.
I'm so pissed. I am actually pissed.
what makes 18 a puppet character? Well, she's able to call upon her brother Android 17 to come over and assist her during a block stringer combo. Even her unique B&B's combos utilize Android 17 coming out and helping her. This isn't like Baby, who uses the assist of dead characters with his specific moves. This 17 is a unique 17. It's not an assist that's on your team, he's just part of her moveset. So yes, she is a puppet character, okay? This isn't the fucking hit stance character shit again. 18 is a puppet character. End of discussion.
Fuck, you know, pause it. How dare you? No, how dare you try to end the conversation? You made this problem. I'm going to solve it, and I'm going to put you in your place. I play this character religiously. I know you made this months ago. You probably are a nice guy, but I gotta put you in your fucking place. How dare you?
Let me tell you that. By effectively call Android 18 a puppet character, that means he has to include Vidal as well.
Oh my, I didn't even think about that. Oh my god. I didn't think about that. Oh my, I swear to god. I actually am having an existential crisis right now. I'm losing my fucking mind.
The fact that he spends so much time on 18 and Menard is rotting my brain, dude.
Zato is able to use his puppet to pressure the opponent with long and hard to block strings, and it gives him good mix-up options, and his frame data isn't tied directly to what Eddie is doing. Also, in Strive, he seems to be able to use Eddie as a shield in front of him, so he can force the enemy to basically whiff and come in with a follow-up attack. Like, I've been told.
See, all of this stuff that he's saying for Zato is all correct. It's all true. Everything he's saying, word for word, about Zato, just Zato alone, is actually right. But everything else prior to that, the other 5 minutes he took to explain a puppet character, all he had to do was just pull up Zato. He spent 5 minutes talking absolute bullshit, and then the final minute and a half, he's actually talking about a character that plays the archetype. He hasn't looked into this well. He hasn't thought about it enough. if anything, it kind of feels like he went on guttural instinct alone and just put 2 and 2 together, like, oh, separate being, like sentient in a way, you can control them to do pressure and shit like that, without really considering the other complexities to them. The definition he gave in the beginning of the video about puppet characters, it's a very good definition. It's a textbook definition, but that's the problem. It's a very textbook definition, which means it's vague. It doesn't give like the actual description of what a puppet character really is and the game plan that it kind of goes with being a puppet character, which when you get to Zato, he pretty much explains it, but with everybody else it doesn't make sense because it doesn't apply.
Yeah, the problem is that he put Monarch first.
No, he put 18 first and then Monarch.
But then he explained Monarch first. I was like, oh no.
I'm still bitter about the way he explained it without really looking into it, but it's like, I'm more disappointed about the fact that he didn't explain it properly, but more so the fact that he's spreading false information. If you wanted to compare another situation like this, it's like with Smash right now, with some Smash players, they thought, okay, they got Ryu and Ken, they're Shotos, Terry's in the game, he must be a Shoto, and then Kazuya is in, he must be Tekken Shoto. No, they're not Shotos. They have Shoto-like qualities, but they're not Shotos in general.
It's not the same thing as you call Akira from Virtual Fighter a fucking Shoto.
When they play nothing like what a Shoto normally would. The only character I can think about that isn't Street Fighter that has a Shoto-like playstyle is Akatsuki from Akatsuki Blitzcamp.
I would say more about Eddie and about how his command grab is cool and how he has a unique game plan compared to the rest of the cast. But I don't play Guilty Gear.
That's the problem!
But Gecko, why didn't you talk about JoJo?
Ah shit, I forgot to talk about Persona.
Interestingly enough, Persona, for all the freaking Persona shit going around, there's actually a dedicated puppet character in that game.
Doesn't he have a dog?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I was about to ask because I saw Moopoke playing that character, or at least someone in that group.
Yeah, he essentially a resident puppet character in that game. It's kind of like a little bit similar to Chaos from Uniclear.
When I make these statements about certain things that I talk about, especially when it comes to like questions that my audience are asking me, I want to be sure that what I'm saying is correct. Not just on my script, but personally speaking, that this is what I believe is true and that it is factually supported. And if you still are confused, you can always just look it up. But with this case, it's like, because I know about this stuff and because I took the time to really understand it and play with it, I know that everything he's talked about within the first 5.5 minutes, it was completely off the mark. Everything he said was completely invalidated by the fact that every character he mentioned until Zato was a set play character, with the exception of Zappa. But Zappa is a summoner with some pseudo puppet character archetype abilities, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would dare to say only the dog is basically a full puppet character. You can actually control the dog separately from Zappa because he does become the dog controller.
He didn't even mention how to control the puppet in general. You have to hold a fucking button, my guy.
Some puppet character, for example, like Zato is more of a negative edge character by releasing the button. Called Clover is basically you have to hold the fucking try button to control it. Debo is interesting because you can control him, but Debo become immobilized. But he can actually do the special move and then disable his controller.
I'm not too sure how Misfortune plays. Even though I played her myself, I wasn't really aware of the fact that she was a puppet character, but I did know that you could potentially control a head. I just never knew how to. But based on what I've seen, it kind of controls very closely to how Zato, actually no, not Zato, more like with Carl.
Yeah, Carl, you have to hold the try button in order to control Nirvana.
The worst part about it is that if he didn't talk about puppet characters, and I mentioned this already, I sound like a broken record and I'm tired, he would have been absolutely correct about everything he said.
Yeah, the thing is that if you switch that puppet character into a set play character, then I can understand.
I mean, 18 is technically set play, like she has something, I'd let that slide. The most important thing with 18 is managing 17 throughout the entirety of the game. You want to be able to jump in on somebody but you don't want to do a setup in case someone DPs, you have an alternative option. You have a defensive option in J214S, which pulls up 17 to do the barrier. Now, if they do something, he takes on the brunt of the hits and you can freely punish. I've done that before. It's a tactic I like to do first before I do the block string, because then it conditions people not to mash.
Because like the moment he brought up 18 was basically like he invalidated his video heavily.
Not only is he spreading false information, he's actively telling people that this is true and it's not to be disputed, which is absolute horseshit, and it sounds like Twitter bullshit. Like, if you didn't know about puppet characters, you could spend about 20, maybe 30 minutes minimum to really look into what a puppet character plays like, what their goals are, how some puppet characters play versus others, and what games feature puppet characters. We already mentioned them, but we don't know if there's any more out there.
Yeah, like a very niche archetype, because they are tend to be very difficult to play.
Very technical.
Also difficult to win too.
And sometimes they can be very, very, very good. But once you take away like certain options from a puppet character player, that's where the weaknesses start to show. With Zato, as soon as his summon is gone, he has to rely solely on his normals. You can pretty much stuff him out if you play your cards right.
Like, the only thing he can rely on when he lost Eddie was his super and his invited to hell. But in Stride, they nerf it to the ground. Like, they shorten the high and then it no longer hit low.
He gave a very brief description of what the archetype is, but not necessarily what really makes the character what it is. You know the puppet character, but what does the puppet do? What is the puppet itself?
That's the thing. Can it be controlled separately? That's the question.
And usually puppets are tied to a life bar.
Today we'll be starting with one of the more unique and niche styles, the puppet character. They are an extremely interesting archetype in my opinion, due to the fact that they require so much awareness to play them. With the core concept behind them of being able to play two characters at the same time, balancing them out can be an extremely technical challenge.
This guy made his point a little bit more reasonable.
He pretty much started off very clearly, and on top of that, he's showing gameplay as to how it works.
Some iconic puppet characters would be along the lines of Carl Clover and Relius from BlazBlue, Lisa Latte Achenbach from Arcane,
I didn't even think of that.
and the Ice Climbers, Popo and Nana from Super Smash Bros. Melee, Brawl, and Ultimate.
Could you really call Ice Climbers that? I mean, I could sort of see where you're coming from that.
Sorta. I think it's sorta because they exist separately.
I guess so. I mean, because they're also very synonymous with each other. When one attacks, the other does the same motion. I didn't know they acted separately.
Yeah, but if a melee, I saw some of the melee that you have to time the attack correctly at the ledge so that Nana gonna do a different attack. It's a little bit technical, but I would give them a pass for the Ice Climber because you can actually destroy them separately.
I think in terms of technicality, I think that works out best, but it's like, it's on the fence.
This guy's more reasonable.
It's not about reasonable, it's more just he's already made his point, and on top of that, his beginning has already started off way better because he described what puppet characters are, he described what it takes to play one, and he described that usually in doing so, there's a level of difficulty because of A, B, C, and he's already listed some characters and they're known for said things because of X, Y, and Z. And on top of that, he's already talking about them. So he gave a brief synopsis and now he's going into more detail.
First off, puppet characters are defined by having two different controllable entities, the puppeteer and the puppet. The puppeteer is directly controlled by the player, while the puppet is controlled by special moves performed by the puppeteer. The puppeteer can always act without the puppet, but the puppet cannot act without special inputs. The puppet will complete whatever command is given to them unless they're interrupted. In most games, you can interrupt them by hitting them with a move, while in some other games you can actually hit the puppeteer to interrupt them. In some games, it's also possible to permanently or temporarily disable the puppet, but in order to win the round against a puppet character, you must reduce the puppeteer's life to 0.
This already clears up everything we just explained in just a matter of less than 2 minutes.
Compared to the other guy, it was like he spent too much time on the joke that he actually lost the key feature of the puppet character is.
It's okay to tell a story through a joke. Like Proxycon, he has a series called What the Fuck is a Insert Archetype Here. He did What the Fuck is a Zoner and What the Fuck is a Grappler, and it pretty much explains like how these characters are designed, what they are, what kind of player realistically would you need to be or want to be in order to play them, what kind of players need to avoid them, and he does it in a joking manner. The other guy kind of does a similar thing, but he falls off hard because he doesn't get the subject right until the very end. This guy took less than 20 seconds after the synopsis and he's already got this on the money.
With that information in mind, let's do a knowledge check. I'm going to show gameplay from two different characters in fighting games. One is a puppet character while the other isn't. The goal is to simply discern which is which. The two characters that we'll be comparing is Minot from Street Fighter V and Celica Mercury from BlazBlue Central Fiction.
I know that Celica was not a puppet character.
Yeah, none of these two people are not puppet characters. Again, at first glance, I could see why you're coming from, but it's not necessarily the same. But in Celica's case, it's a little bit weird because it technically acts similarly to a puppet, but more so like 17 does for 18.
The thing about Celica is that 90% of the move is from her puppet. Celica barely do anything.
Granted, she gets involved, like when you do the throw, she does the plug. She also has her godforsaken 4A. Like, Celica's a funny character. She's a quirky character with a not so quirky
Really,
guardian, but it's a funny duo. Because it's like, she does everything in her power to protect Celica, and Celica's just such a fucking brainlet.
You see, that shit is the same as Bridget.
Yeah, it's set play. This is Lychee in a nutshell as well. This is just like Rose.
Granted, Rose is actually her teacher.
Beat it on the guard point.
No, that doesn't matter because when he got it, it actually enhanced the DP, so he lost all of the health he would have gained. And right now, oh no, Nandamanai, please don't do it. Don't do it. He's doing it. Okay.
Do you have to hold a button though?
Nope.
Does man not have to do any button holding or do any kind of shit similar to what Zato does or anything like Misfortune?
Nope.
Because universally speaking, mostly all puppet characters play very much alike with subtle differences with how they manage the puppet and how it kind of functions in regards to their life. Because in Misfortune's case, she takes direct damage from her head getting hit, and on top of that, there is a cooldown that happens because the blood is draining from her head, literally, and she has to wait until she's conscious again. And Zato's case, you use up all the meter, you gotta wait until it goes all the way back up, or you can deactivate it and reset the whole thing. But they act differently because their life bars are completely different. Eddie has his own life bar, and if he gets hit, it doesn't directly affect Zato, but in Misfortune's case, it does.
Debo from JoJo, basically like his puppet need to be summoned when he control it. The puppet gonna lying down, but then when you control him directly, Debo got completely stationary. Like the only thing you can move is the puppet. However, if you leave the standoff mode, you can actually make the puppet do the special move, while Debo is just moving on his own.
Minot fits all the criteria of the key features that make up a puppet character. The character is made of two different entities, Minot herself the puppeteer, and the crystal ball, which is the puppet. The player directly controls Minot, while the crystal ball only accepts commands from special moves. You can also see that attacking Minot did not interrupt the ball, and it continued to do its command.
That's the same shit with Lychee. The moment Lychee call her stab back, even if you hit her, that stab still hit you way back.
With a puppet character, that doesn't happen. If that shit happens and it still hits you, chances are it's not a puppet character. You know why? Because a puppet character is tied directly to the puppeteer. Set play, on the other hand, is not. Unless it's somebody like 18, for instance. 18 is designed to be disrupted. If she gets hit, 17 leaves. 18 is a special case, is because 17 isn't just like an object or anything else that sets something up. It's not like a projectile or anything like that. It's a separate being. I can kind of see why people are making mistakes when it comes to these arguments, because they're taking separate beings or separate entities that you can control, and they have very similar capabilities, but the mechanics of themselves and the way that they function is completely different from each other. Set play, in a sense, can be looked at first glance and think, oh, technically that is a puppeteer. You would be wrong in saying so, but I get the confusion. Separating set play from puppet characters is at first glance difficult. Without any sort of prior knowledge to it, I would understand the confusion. The nuances themselves are what really put a cover, like it kind of is like a curtain. You got to move it aside, and eventually you get to the nitty and gritty of things. It's not so hard to like really understand these concepts. It's just that being able to understand it is one thing, being able to explain it is another. If you can explain it to somebody else, then you have a better understanding. But if you don't really have a good understanding and you try to explain it, you're just going to be talking out of your ass.
Just like all the puppet character, if you happen to hit the puppeteer, the puppet will be disrupted no matter what.
One of the questions you might be asking is, what are the general weaknesses that are usually tied to puppet characters? And to be honest, that is a fairly difficult question to answer. Usually the only real unifying trait of puppet characters is that by design they are reliant on their puppets. However, in some games that isn't the case, like with Misfortune from Skullgirls. Because of how unique every puppet character works, it's hard to find some common weaknesses that they have.
See, right here is correct. If it wasn't for that segment alone, this whole video would have been good. It's still great. I just think that little snippet was more so out of confusion rather than just out of negligence.
For instance, Chaos's Azzy from Uniel has a strong emphasis on long-range pressure, while Zui's Learn from GranBlue Versus has a focus on Okazemi and aggressive lockdown. In this specific instance, I think it's extremely important to look at it case by case. So why would you want to play a puppet character? Well, if the idea of being able to control two different characters at the same time interests you, or if the idea of tag teaming an opponent seems fun, or even just the thought of having extremely unique setups that can be difficult to deal with, and in some cases unblockable, interests you, a puppet character might be the choice for you.
See, I think what he goes about doing is actually really good for the most part. The only real downsides to his argument are just mainly back to the confusion of things. He got it right for the most part. He was like pretty much 80% right. I would give this a really good grade. Like, he really got the nitty and gritty down. He not only just talked about characters, but he also explained what it takes to play them and the nuances that go into that, and as well as character specifics, which is one important thing to highlight. But then we got to that segment and both characters were not puppet characters. With set play, a lot of set play can be dedicated to Oki
and Midis.
Exactly. Testament can do that when you're standing, but a lot of the time you want to have your set play after a character is in a knockdown state. Byakuya is like this. He sets up a couple traps, crosses you up, and if one trap doesn't get you, the other trap might. You have to be on your toes at all times with people who have set play, because you never know for sure if they're going to commit to the set play or if they're going to cancel that out and try something different. That takes awareness from the opponent, but mostly from the actual player themselves. And in the same vein, puppet characters take just as much awareness, if not more, because now they're managing two different life bars, or two different beings that are sentient of each other. That's why I'm a little bit more lenient with this guy. The other guy just talked about it as if it's undisputed fact. This guy, it seems more like he got confused and he kind of mixed them up, because in theory they sound the same, but they're not.
Because the problem with Monarch Ball is that you cannot hit that ball. It's literally a projectile.
The thing that makes it super difficult to explain as well, even for guys like us or guys who are much better experts at this than we are, is the fact that explaining it is one thing. It's trying to give a general explanation to a topic that is usually a case-by-case basis. Chaos, when it comes to the realm of puppet characters, is very different in comparison to someone like Zato. And Zato is subtly different from Carl, and Carl is different from Relius. Basically, not every puppet character functions the same way, and trying to come up with a general description can be hell on earth because you will accidentally describe a set play character.
Or a rushdown character, nonetheless. Like, a lot of people mistake Misfortune for a rushdown character.
And they're not wrong, because she technically is. She's pseudo rushdown, but can play as a puppet character if need be, which a lot of her strength comes from that.
Also, like the same case for Zappa. Zappa is a rushdown type puppet character if he got a dog. The moment he got a dog, it's basically a rushdown oriented character.